A very good morning, and you're welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. We hope you're keeping safe and well wherever you're joining us from today. From time to time on the series, we invite key figures within the agri-food sector to join us to discuss some of the broader issues affecting sustainability in the sector. And this morning, we're delighted to be joined by Professor Frank O'Mara, who is Director of Teagasc. And Frank, you're very, very welcome to this morning's webinar.
Good morning, Mark.
So we're going to have a slightly different format than we normally have. Frank is going to be answering questions that we put to him this morning, so an interview style session, and we invite everyone to submit their questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. And of course, today's session will be recorded and will be available on the Teagasc YouTube channel afterwards. Frank, you're almost 3 years in the role as Director of Teagasc. How has it been so far for you?
Thanks, Mark. Look, great. You know what I mean? It's hard to believe it's 3 years already. They have just flown. It's a great opportunity for me. I love the job. Teagasc is a great organization to lead. We've got really good staff, hard working, dedicated, talented staff, and the agri-food sector is, a positive industry to work with. It does good things, produces food. So you're working in a sector that has a very 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 important mission. So yeah, look, it's been great, busy, challenging, but I wouldn't swap it for anything else.
Great, great. So we're going to get straight into the questions, I think, and because I know these hours tend to fly by, so look forward to receiving questions from our audience. But to start out, Frank, how would you assess the state of Irish agriculture in 2024?
Oh, that's a big question, Mark. So look, it's a challenging period, I think, for farmers, and farmers are feeling that challenge at the moment. We've had a very rough 12 months of weather since about this time last year. Profitability has been very challenged, partly due to the weather, but for other factors as well. I think we've seen regulations really biting in some sectors. The change to the maximum organic nitrogen level under the Nitrates Directive. And I suppose there's maybe a sense among farmers that farming is getting more complicated. There's more things to do. There's more boxes that have to be ticked and so on. So that sense is certainly there among farmers. And look, we do have, I suppose, some worrying indicators in terms of output, like milk output year to date is down 7 or 8%. Probably a lot of it weather related, but nevertheless, that's a big drop. The beef cattle disposals year to date are probably running fairly similar to last year, but yet we have indications of another fairly big drop in the suckler herd coming in 2024 after a fairly sizable drop in 2023. And the sheep census figures came out in the last few days, and at the end of December, ewe numbers were down, I think, 3.7% compared to the previous year. And we all know that the rough autumn and spring we had for tillage and horticultural crops, and that culminated in very late planting for a lot of our tillage crops, which is probably going to affect the yield of those crops. The pigs and poultry sector are probably doing better than they have for the last couple of years, coming out of a very deep and dark period for those sectors. So, but anyway, these drops in output, they are worrying if there were a trend, because it means less money coming into the country for exports, less money circulating in rural communities. It impacts on jobs in the processing and the supply sector. So those are things we obviously have to be very mindful of. But by and large, I suppose when you stand back and look at it, and you try to take a longer term view rather than just the year to year variation, I think the fundamentals are pretty sound for Irish agriculture. We are very competitive in terms of what we produce, and we need to be, because we export. I think our Irish food has a very good reputation abroad for safety, for quality, and that stands to us in terms of our access into premium markets. So when you take those couple of factors into account, I think the prospects for Irish agriculture are good, because food isn't going to go out of fashion, and the type of food we produce isn't going out of fashion, and we are good at producing it.
According to the United Nations, the world's population is expected to increase by nearly 2 billion people in the next 30 years, from the current 8 billion to 9.7 billion in 2050. Do you think society fully understands the challenges associated with this figure, particularly when it comes to feeding that amount of people? That's a real challenge for
It
society
is.
as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, maybe we've become a bit complacent in terms of food supply, especially the part of the world that we live in, where by and large there's never a shortage of food. We never have to worry, will we be able to get enough to eat today, tomorrow, next week? But you know, the world population has grown a lot in the last 50 years, and that has been supported in terms of food production by what we call the Green Revolution, which was basically, you know, the use of fertilizers and the use of pesticides and better varieties and better breeding and so on. Technology basically allowed us to produce a lot more food and therefore feed this growing population. But for the next 50 years, or the next 20 years, I guess, you know, what's going to happen. We probably now are putting a lot of our research and innovation efforts into making more sustainable fertilizers or more sustainable ways to fertilize our crops and to grow them with less pesticides and so on. So the research and innovation effort isn't going into growing yields. It's going into making what we're doing currently more sustainable. But yet at the same time, we have to produce, you know, quite a bit of extra food, and we don't have extra land. And you know, again, the I suppose pressure to avoid deforestation is huge around the world. So bringing extra land into production is not going to be easy. So we've all these I suppose things that we didn't have for the last 50 years that allowed us to grow food production. We have different things at play now. So I think people don't maybe fully realize the challenge that we will have, that the global food system will have in terms of sustainably producing that extra food for the growing population.
I heard a paper presented there last year talking about the impacts of the European Green Deal on food production, and there was estimates that food production would be reduced by 15% if all of the measures within the Green Deal were to be implemented. What are your thoughts on, you know, where do we source those alternative proteins, or how can we fill that gap, that 15%, if that those figures are correct?
But I think that's the challenge for research and innovation, to allow us to kind of have it both ways, that we can reduce you know, some of the big things in the Green Deal. We're reducing fertilizer use, reducing nutrient surpluses, reducing pesticide use and fertilizer use and so on. So can we still maintain and indeed increase our productivity from our animals and our crops while reducing those inputs? So there's an awful lot of work going on to try to ameliorate, I suppose, those issues, Mark. And I suppose by and large in Ireland, we've seen over the last number of years, we have maintained, indeed even increased our production, while we have used an awful lot less pesticides. We've used an awful lot less fertilizer, maybe in some ways too little fertilizer on some of our soils. And we've been able to maintain and indeed continue to increase production. So we've got to try to break this link between the inputs and the outputs, or at least get a lot more efficient in terms of how we're using those inputs and what we can get out from them, and make more use of, I suppose you can call them nature-based solutions. So instead of having fertilizer delivered through the gate on a lorry, can we take it out of the air? That's nitrogen fertilizer. So those kind of solutions become, I think, more and more important as we move forward.
I had the privilege of visiting a Signpost farm yesterday in South Galway, and that farmer had reduced his nitrogen from 8 tons per year down to 2 tons whilst maintaining his production. So really practical example of the work that's going on there, supported by the Signpost advisory team. Looking to, farming is getting a lot of a real bashing at times in the media, and sometimes some people will say it's an easy one to go for. But to look at the positives, what would you see as the main opportunities for agriculture in Ireland over the next number of years?
Well, look, we're an exporting country, right? And we export. For the main products that we produce, we export, 90% of our beef and our dairy products. We certainly import other foods, but for what we're good at producing in this country, we export them, and we're competitive, and that's a huge plus for us. Our grass-based systems allow us to be competitive internationally, which is critical if you're going to export. And the other really positive thing, I think, is that Irish food does have a very high reputation, for for its qualities, its safety. You know, we have a very strong system of food safety in this country. You know, we have a very good image for the quality, the taste, the and so on of our food products. And you know, that's underpinned again by our grass-based system, but also underpinned by the good work that organizations like Board Bia and our processors do. So I think, you know, the opportunity for Ireland is you know, as an exporting country, to continue to try to get into the premium markets around the world, so that we're getting the value for the high quality products that we're producing here. And you know, I think we're also well served in this country by strong institutions, and I'd include Teagasc in that, but also I mentioned Board Bia, ICBF, Animal Health Ireland, and so on. And you know, we have a very good advisory and education service that you don't see in many other countries. So we've good institutions and structures set up, and I think they're a real bonus and positive for Irish agriculture. Of course, we have challenges. You know, we have environmental targets that are quite difficult to meet, and you know, that's I think where the big challenge is for the sector for the coming decade.
In terms of opportunities, I also, in terms of, you know, diversification or other cropping opportunities, I saw a piece there, I think it was on RT News, about wine production in Wexford. We're seeing the impacts of climate change already having effect on the type of cropping. Do you see opportunities there for Ireland around those types of changes that are coming down the tracks?
Well, look, certainly diversification opportunities are always important to have. You know, people always, and as long as I've been around, people have been, you know, they've been inquisitive and want to try new things and so on. And I suppose that the big diversification opportunities at the moment, you know, the ones that would maybe result in a lot of land use change, would be things like forestry, growing crops for anaerobic digestion, organics as not maybe a big diversification, but a change in system. So and we have seen, obviously, in organics, we've seen a big growth in the last 3 or 4 years, gone from less than 2% to about 5% of our land in organics. New forestry program launched last year, very attractive payment rates. Still, I suppose, you know, slow maybe in terms of getting traction with farmers opting into that yet, but I believe, you know, there is a lot of interest. When Teagasc ran forestry clinics there earlier in the year, we had huge interest in farmers coming in inquiring about it. So let's see how that goes. And their anaerobic digestion is probably at an early stage. It could well be an attractive option for some farmers, depending on how it develops. In terms of the other diversification options, like you just mentioned, the wine and so on, look, I think there will always be opportunities that people will try in the horticulture sector. You know, we put extra resources ourselves into the area of apple production and other top fruits. Also in terms of, you know, things like foliage and flowers. You know, there's some great examples of people getting into those businesses and setting up good businesses. But I suppose they're small in terms of their overall land demand. So they might be very important for individual farmers or a number of farmers or horticulturalists, but they're not going to dramatically change the land use pattern in the country. Whether the wine comes, I don't know. We'll wait and see. We're reasonably good at some of the other beverages. Our brewing sector, our distilling sector, our whiskies are really going well. And I think that's, again, an opportunity for Ireland, and we've very good reputation for those products abroad. But for Irish farmers to grow the high quality grain into that premium market for brewing and distilling, I think it's great to see that sector maybe growing and providing that opportunity for Irish farmers.
And I understand Teagasc is making an investment there in relation to supporting that brewing industry and other drinks industry. That's
right. Yeah, we're establishing, with support from the Department of Agriculture, a brewing and distilling centre here in Oak Park. And that will allow, you know, I suppose, the smaller players in the sector to test out product, to test out raw material, see the impact it would have on their particular products and so on. So look, I think that's going to be a good addition to the innovation needs of that sector.
Now, no doubt we're going to get questions from our audience in relation to livestock production and gaseous emissions and climate change. You recently spoke at the British Society of Animal Science conference in Belfast on the role of livestock in our economy and ecosystems, and you discussed the legitimacy of livestock in our food system. What did you mean by that, Frank?
Yeah, so look, I suppose it's a thing. You see a lot of people questioning the role of livestock in our food system, going as far as saying we should have none or we should have less or whatever. So, I suppose questioning what I consider the legitimacy of livestock. So I try to address that, and I came at it from three ways, I think, or, try to justify or establish the legitimacy of livestock. First of all, they're critically important for converting forages and low quality byproduct type feedstuffs, coming from as byproducts from industry, converting those into human edible food. So livestock, if we didn't have livestock, we couldn't do that. There'd be huge parts of our country and huge parts of the world would not be available for food production. So livestock, in particular ruminants, but not just ruminants, fill a very important niche in our food ecosystem by doing that. The second thing is that, when we return the livestock manures back to the soils from which their feed was produced, we're bringing circularity into the overall feed system. That relationship between plants and livestock is critical. We can't have just animals or we can't have just crops. We need the two. And the big reason we need the two is that return of livestock manures back to crop producing areas. And that's hugely important for long-term soil health. And the third big plank of the legitimacy of livestock is the quality of the products that they produce. They're a huge part of the global protein supply. Somewhere around 30% of the global protein that we eat comes from livestock products. But it's not just that percentage, it's the quality of that protein. It's very high, or very good amino acid profile, so it's very high quality protein. And livestock products or animal source foods also contain very high levels of some bioavailable minerals and other required nutrients, vitamins, fatty acids, and so on. And that makes livestock products a really useful part of the diet of people at critical stages of their life. And that's, for young children and adolescents, for pregnant women, and for people at the latter stages of their life. You can get nutrients from animal source foods that are critical to you at those stages of your life easier than you can from other diets. So for those three reasons, I think, there is an incredibly important part for livestock to play in our overall food system. And the challenge for us is how can we ensure that livestock are minimizing the negative externalities while they contribute or continue to make those really, really important contributions to our food system.
And we've had many presentations on the series around those mitigation efforts and food additives or feed additives in particular. So I mean, I know there's a lot of exciting research happening there in that space at the moment. Just in terms of the implications then for, let's say, the other parts of the agri-food sector, given you're saying that maybe the less accessible parts of the country are well suited for livestock production. What about the more productive areas in the East Coast? We see some tillage lands being converted into solar farms now, and does that concern you, where we see really good quality land going into non-food production activities?
Well, look, that's obviously a matter for the individual landowners in the first place, what to do with their land. I don't want to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't do with their land. And I suppose it's a matter for policy if they want to if they want to put some guidance around the land type that should be used for developments like that for energy production. I think in some countries they have guidance like that. And I suppose, look, from my position as the head of the Agriculture and Food Development Authority, I don't to see, I suppose, a reduction in our food production capability. And, some of our really good land being converted into solar farms. Well, you're going to produce less food off that. Certainly, there may be opportunities for some light grazing, but it's not going to produce as much food as it did previously. So look, that's the balance, I suppose, that the individual landowner and that society maybe has to weigh up as to what are our priorities in terms of the need to produce renewable energy versus the need to produce food. I suppose from my own perspective for solar, I think it is really important, but I see huge increase in the number of solar installations on domestic houses and also on farm and industrial buildings. And look, I think there's huge scope there to increase the solar generation on both farm and industrial buildings. And look, lots of farmers and others indeed are opting into that.
Yeah, no, it's great to see the response to that, those incentives that the department have put in place as well on the investment side. Looking at the climate side of things, you're a member of the Climate Advisory Council, and based on the insights and reports that you've reviewed as part of this work, what do you see as the main changes will need to happen in rural Ireland for the country to achieve these climate action targets, rather ambitious targets, some would say stretch targets. And I know we had Mary Donnelly from the chair of the Climate Advisory Council at the beef event last week, and spoke about the changes that need to happen. But from your own perspective, what would you say are the key changes that need to take place?
Yeah. So look, agriculture has very challenging targets, as do all sectors, if we're going to decarbonize our economy and reduce our climate impact. So looking at the agriculture side, we have this 25% target to reduce emissions by 2030. Teagasc has set out in a marginal abatement cost curve about this time last year a pathway to achieving that. Now, it does require a lot of measures to be adopted at a very high rate of adoption by farmers, and indeed some of the measures are still only being fine-tuned in research, and won't really be available until later in the decade. But essentially, that MAC marginal abatement cost curve sets out a plan, and that plan has been more or less, I suppose, incorporated into the government's climate action plan. As to how to address the emissions in the agriculture sector. And indeed, Mary Donnelly and the Climate Council are very supportive of the approach that we've laid out in the climate action, or in the MAC. And as you say, last week we had Mary on a panel at our beef open day in Grange, and she was very clear, that we really need to see speed of adoption of the key measures in the MAC. And the ones, I suppose, that she pointed out were the switch to protected urea as something that is a relatively easy switch for farmers to make. I'd say relatively now, because it's not maybe as simple as some people might think. The reduction in overall fertilizer use, on which we have made great progress, and the reduction in the age at which we bring our animals to their slaughter weights. So and there are three of the key measures in the MAC, and there's others there as well that I would point out, like continuing to improve the genetic merit of our cows and so on. I don't want to go into them all, because I know you've dealt with those in other webinars, Mark. But so I think at least there's a reasonable consensus around both government, ourselves, industry, the Climate Council, that the adoption of the measures in the MAC is what's going to allow agriculture to reach its target. So the challenge for us is to support farmers to do that, because it'll be farmers will do it. It's not Teagasc. Teagasc won't deliver the MAC. It'll be the 130,000 farmers adopting those measures, but we're there to support them. I know it's very much supported by industry, by farm organisations. So look, that's the challenge for us now. We are making progress. I think we've made great progress, probably assisted by the price of fertilizer, in reducing our overall fertilizer use. As I said, we might have gone too far in terms of our P's and K's there. We're making good progress, maybe not as fast as we'd like in terms of switching to protected urea. And certainly, there's a lot going on farms around the efficiency of beef production that I think we will make good progress in that reduction of the age at slaughter.
Obviously, climate is one of the big priorities. There's water quality, biodiversity. There's a lot being asked of farmers. In your introduction, you talked about the increasing complexity of farming. Do you think there's enough support there for farmers through this change? this we talk about the importance of having an enabling environment for change to happen. And do you think there's enough resources available to achieve that? I know Teagasc is always tight for resources in terms of staffing and so on. But aside from that, I know there's huge cooperation from the wider industry also. What if you had a free hand? What would you like to see happening there in terms of that's creating that supporting environment?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose we certainly need to use the resources that are there, supporting farmers to best effect, and that means coordinate as well as we can across the ACAS, or the Agricultural Knowledge and Innovation System. So Teagasc has a very important role there, but there are large numbers of private advisors out there. There's the agri industry has a lot of contact with farmers, and I think together there is a lot of support for farmers, and indeed the farm organisations, give a great service to their members. But the schemes that are available, the standards that are required for food production now, they're only going in one direction of becoming more and more complex. And for the average age of farmers is somewhere around 59. That means there's quite a few above that, and it's a huge amount of change, I suppose, for people that maybe have farmed in a particular way, or with relatively easy to comply with regulations for maybe 40 or 50 years. It's a lot of change to I suppose push in front of those people, and they do need a lot of support with that. And we have, as we've big resources, and we've very hardworking and dedicated staff working with farmers and with students indeed. But we're limited in terms of the numbers we have, and it is a challenge to be able to give the kind of level of support that some people might need in order to come into those schemes, and to comply with all the various regulations. So look, and I see it, it's going to be a challenge that will remain with us, Mark, for the foreseeable future.
We saw this week, Frank, a group of scientists from Maynooth University were in the news for their work around future weather patterns, and their models suggest that the frequency and of extreme weather events, temperature events in Ireland has changed from being 1 in 180 years to 1 in 9 years, which is quite a startling statistic. Do you think there's enough research taking place in relation to the changes that farming will have to make in order to adapt to these new weather patterns, and what are we likely to see there?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I suppose for the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've been involved in climate related research and knowledge transfer over that period, and most of the focus, probably understandably, was around mitigation. But I think we've got to accept now, temperatures have risen by over a degree. The world is rapidly approaching the phase where we're going to know that we're not going to be able to keep within the 1.5 degree limit set in the Paris Agreement. So we've got to prepare for the future, and that's across all sectors. That means our infrastructure in the country, our houses, our in particular coastal areas, and so on, are going to have to prepare for what the changing climate is going to bring to us. And that study from Maynooth, talked about that, and talked about more higher temperature events or heat waves, but also we're going to have more floods and heavy rainfall events, and so on. So how does agriculture adapt to all that? Well, look, it's not that we haven't been doing any research on that. We actually had a forestry open day here in Oak Park yesterday, and one of the stands that talked about research we're doing around how forests are going to cope with the changing climate in the future. And on the agriculture side, we have been doing quite a bit of research in terms of the drought tolerance of our grasslands in particular, and I suppose multi-species swards are maybe one of the innovations that can be used. They appear to have greater drought tolerance. I think we've also been very conscious of to be able to assist farmers with short-term tactical decision making. And grass is probably the crop that responds most quickly to changes in weather. So now we in our in our pasture-based decision support tool, we're able to predict ahead. We're bringing in the weather forecast into the predictions that farmers have, and people will see those every Sunday on the Met Éireann weather forecast at lunchtime, where we give grass growth for the week ahead. And but I suppose the big response maybe that we have seen, and that Teagasc indeed has been part of, is encouraging farmers to have more stocks of silage, to be able to cope with whether it's a drought in the summer or an extra long winter. And we saw in 2018 with the very severe drought we had to import fodder into the country. And I think since then the advice has been to carry more reserves, and I think that stood us in good stead over the winter that's just gone by, where we had a very long winter and a very late spring. And yes, certainly on some farms they needed to buy forage from other farmers, but by and large there was enough in the country. It's actually one of the things we're concerned, I suppose, about at the moment. Are we going to be able to replenish those fodder stocks now in time for the next winter? Because it hasn't been a great grass growing season so far. We're lower than, we're about a ton of dry matter per hectare or thereabouts, lower year to date than the average. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit now, but I think that's a good example of where farmers have actually reacted and adapted their systems to cope with climate change by carrying those extra reserves. And I suppose another adaptation that would be really useful would be to have extra slurry storage capacity on our farms, because if the weather's really bad in the spring, you want to be able to put that slurry out at the time when it's going to be used to best effect, rather than because you need to move it out. So and that's one of the really important things for improving water quality as well. So there's a good bit going on, Mark, but I think we certainly need to put more focus, and we'll be putting more focus on adaptation. And look, I mentioned the forestry work we're doing. We've a very exciting new project starting on the cropping sector now, called Agri-Adapt, that's looking at adaptation in the cropping sector.
Excellent. Yeah, and I see that the Food and our Fodder and Food Security Committee will be meeting on Monday to discuss the more recent weather events. So I know Teagasc is playing a major role in supporting that committee.
That's right. We're doing a survey of fodder stocks on farms now. We normally do on this time of year, so at least we'll have some information on Monday as to what the state of play is with building up fodder reserves. So that'll be good information when we get it.
Excellent. In terms of water quality, I know that Teagasc has recently launched a major new water quality campaign. What is your ambition in relation to that campaign?
So yes, we launched what we call Better Farming for Water, 8 Actions for Change. And I'll come back to those 8 actions for change in a minute. But basically the aim is to support farmers to take actions on all farms to get all water bodies that are affected by agricultural activity into good or high status. And this is building very much on the initiatives that are already in place, such as the ASIP or the Agricultural Catchments Programme, or other EIPs, or the Tier Lawn Slaney project, and so on. But it's trying to, I suppose, bring a focus across the entire Teagasc advisory service on water quality, and to link out to all the other actors in this as well, in a multi-actor campaign. It was a campaign the minister asked us to launch, and he was very specific around trying to harness the full ecosystem of supports for farmers, the full ACAS. So look, we've identified these 8 actions for change, and they're across three areas. There's nutrient management, there's farmyard management, and there's land management. And within those, I won't go through the 8 actions, Mark, but if we could get every farmer to do 1 or 2 actions, it would make a huge difference. And our job now is to support farmers to do that. We'll start by trying to make them more aware of their local water quality. And, we'll use the EPA database, a very good database, and catchments.ie, that gives all that local water quality information. And it's available in what we call the PIP maps. So, we'll be highlighting that local water quality element to farmers. We'll then be, going through their farming operation with them, and what might be impacting water quality in the things that they're doing on their particular farm. and supporting them maybe to change practices in order to reduce that impact. So look, it's a major initiative for us, and we're going to be putting a big focus on it. And I think the challenge is very clear that we need to improve our water quality.
And I suppose the question that's at the forefront of many dairy farmers' minds in Ireland is the nitrates derogation. Do you think that Ireland will be successful in renewing its derogation at the end of this current term?
Look, it's a big challenge, but I certainly hope so, Mark. Our campaign, it's, when the minister launched it, he said there's two things we need to do, two objectives for all the efforts going in across the country for water quality. One is to retain the derogation, and the other is to improve water quality. So it's very central in terms of what we're doing with the water quality campaign. And the challenge for us is that, the Commission has set out that, the water bodies that we have in good or high must stay there, and the ones that are in moderate, poor, or bad must be seen to be improving. And while water quality is relatively good in Ireland compared to other countries, we've got about 54% of our water bodies in that good or high status. The challenge for us is that it has stayed at that level more or less for the last decade. And how do we move them? How do we get that shift from the ones that are in moderate, poor, or bad? How do we get those moving? So look, that's the challenge for us in the campaign. That's why we will be trying to engage all farmers in this, and highlighting maybe the one or the two actions that would make a difference on their farms. And look, I think when you boil down the actions, and they're all very practical things to do, and if we can see widespread movement along those, I've no doubt we are going to see that improvement in water quality.
Very good. Yes, I mean, there's no question. There's a huge effort described within the plan. So it's I suppose attracting the resources to achieve those objectives is going to be a challenge, and of course it's going to have to be across the whole of the agri-food sector and rural communities. Of course, we know that agriculture isn't the only impact that it has on water quality. We know that rural.
Yeah, and look, people often focus a lot on the derogation, and rightly so. It's very important for the farmers that avail of it, and very important for the dairy sector in particular. But look, we saw when the reduction in the maximum level went from 250 to 220 just this year, and previous changes around banding and so on. We saw the knock-on effects that can have in other sectors in terms of the demand for land. But I would also say, look, good water is just something that we need to have. Everybody deserves to have good water. We all deserve to live in a country that has good water quality. So it's really important for businesses that rely on water for part of their activities. And food processing does rely on water, and we rely on it for our leisure activities. But from an exporting country, and I talked earlier that we are an exporting country, it's really important that our food is perceived as coming from a country where the water quality is good. So whether you're exporting dairy products or meat products, or products from our tillage industry, such as beverages, that the intrinsic value of being able to say we have good water quality in Ireland adds to the value of those products. So it is something for all farmers, I think, to have a vested interest in. And obviously it's something for the whole country to be able to say that, we live in a country with very good water quality.
I think it's true to say that consumers are much more educated and know that the types of claims that some marketing companies often make, and are better able to challenge those now. So I think it is really important that those figures stack up. Just if I could use a biodiversity analogy for the moment, we talk about endangered species, and if a population isn't recruiting or having young, there's a problem. Could we just extend that in looking at agriculture, and we see the numbers of farmers coming into the sector, the age profile of farmers in the country. Does that concern you, Frank, about how attractive farming is becoming, and particularly let's say the sectors such as beef and sheep and even tillage as well. We know that dairy is probably the more profitable of the enterprises. What's your overall view on that, or what needs to happen to try and change that trend?
Yeah, so look, we could spend a whole hour on this, Mark.
Mm,
Succession and new people coming into the industry, and obviously it's critically important. So look, it's concern is maybe the wrong word, but it's certainly something we need to be very conscious of. On the positives, we see huge numbers of people looking to come to do our Teagasc education courses, and indeed, other courses offered by the private sector. So there is a lot of people want to learn about farming. Now, a lot of those maybe are going to be part-time farmers. So that's a big change that we have seen in the last 20 years, the growth in part-time farming. And I think that's not going to reverse anytime soon. But at least those people are getting a good training in agriculture. So just because you're part-time doesn't mean that you're not a good farmer, and doesn't mean that you're not, contributing to food production. So I think that's one thing we have to recognize. I suppose we will probably have less full-time farmers, but not necessarily less, people that are still very invested in farming and in producing food. I think though, and it's not just in Ireland, we are seeing concerns about, people coming into the industry, and in particular, people coming into work full time in the industry, because it is a challenging sector to work in. You do have to work hard. The returns are low enough. Even in our best sectors, dairying, like we had a great year in 2022, but profitability dropped by about 60% in 2023. Now, which of us, you and I, Mark, we get a salary at the end of every month. Imagine if it was fluctuating by 60% up or down year to year. It is challenging. So you have those concerns, but as I said, there still seems to be a very strong pipeline of people wishing to come into the industry. So we've always had reductions in the numbers of farmers. If you go back enough thousand years, we were all farmers because everyone was a hunter gatherer. And obviously, as farming has got better over the years, a smaller number of people are able to produce the food that we require, or farm the land that we farm, and that's likely to continue because technology and efficiency will allow farmers to continue to scale up a little bit. So we've always seen that drop in numbers. Are we at a kind of a tipping point that we're seeing a lot of people exiting the sector and maybe not coming back in? It's hard to know, but it certainly is something that we need to monitor very carefully. I mentioned earlier, like the drop in suckler cow numbers. We've seen a drop of about 6 or 7% last year, maybe something similar again this year. And I don't think we're terribly clear as to what's driving that. It seems to be it's not a big swing into dairying as we might have had 3 or 4 years ago. It's farmers, maybe because of age or maybe because of other reasons, reducing the number of cows they have, or getting out of cows and just carrying dry stock for the summer months or whatever. So look, we've all that dynamic going on that would cause you to be a little bit concerned. But look, let's not let's not over worry about it for the moment.
I'm conscious a lot of our discussion so far has been in relation to food production. But of course, we know that farmers are being increasingly recognized for the ecosystem services or habitats that are being protected or even promoted at a farm level. There's been a huge amount of effort, obviously, coming through from the Common Agricultural Policy to protect habitats. But what is Teagasc doing to contribute to that protection of biodiversity on farms in Ireland? And what do you see as the potential there, scope for increasing that market for ecosystem services?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and we all know that biodiversity is very important. We have to maintain the biodiversity that we have in our landscapes and in our farmlands, and obviously try to improve it. So some of the things we're doing, Mark, I think the new acre scheme has been a huge a huge scheme in relation to biodiversity. You know, it is one of the big targets of it. There's 55,000 farmers in it, and Teagasc are supporting a lot of those farmers. And I suppose things like the design of the acre scheme, you know, where does all that come from? Well, it comes from work that we would have been somewhat, you know, involved in, some of the EIPs that have run for many years. So Teagasc has been, I suppose we've had a research program around farmland biodiversity for a good few years, and also below ground biodiversity. And that has helped to inform a lot of these schemes that we now have to support biodiversity. And we're involved in a lot of the very good EIPs that have been ongoing around the country over the last number of years. And then we run a lot of initiatives like Hedgerow Week and so on, that, you know, help, I suppose, bring the practicalities of how farmers can improve biodiversity on their farms. And obviously things like, you know, our hedges are hugely important. And just looking at the landscape behind you, Mark, there, you know, the amount of hedgerows in that landscape is really good. So they are one of the key assets we have in relation to biodiversity on farmland, and planting more of those and improving the management of the ones that we have is something that, you know, I think is going to be very important for the future, and something that we put a lot of emphasis on.
Another aspect, of course, of sustainability that farmers often are asked to, well, it is part of the regulations, is animal welfare. There have been a number of different studies and reports on animal welfare. Can you comment on what your expectation around, this is a question from one of our audience members here, can you comment on what your expectation around live export of calves continuing, and what will the impact be on Ireland's total methane emissions if banned? So there's, I suppose, a combined climate and animal welfare question there.
Yeah. So look, it's a good question. So we export somewhere of the order of 200,000 calves, or maybe a little bit more, every year, and it's an important outlet for those calves. You know, it's an important market at a time when there's lots of calves coming through the marts that they're important buyers for calves at that time, the exporters. So there's a lot of scrutiny around that, you know, and we see, you know, some of the recipient countries, the Netherlands, you know, not very maybe reluctant, or some you know, some of the political parties very anti the import of calves. And I suppose what we've got to do is make sure that we you know, adhere to or exceed all the regulations that are there to protect the welfare of calves during transport. And you know, and they certainly do put a lot of effort in. I think that the exporters to ensuring that, and the Department of Agriculture put a lot of effort into inspecting and regulating that sector. So but will it continue, I guess, is the question that that your questioner there is asking. Some of the potential changes to the regulations will challenge the live export of calves, but maybe not make it impossible. So things like, will we have to feed our calves during transport? And that's certainly something that, you know, for the last number of years, we've had a research program around the welfare of calves in transport. And by and large, calves, they're, you know, they're reasonably resilient, and once they're well treated, they actually arrive in very good health at the end destination, and that's what the evidence shows. But, you know, things like being able to feed them during that journey on board the trucks, that may be something we'll have to look at. So I guess the challenge for us, like, you know, we do live in a single market. So I think the opportunity to export is part of the single market, but the regulations around that is what we are going to have to ensure that we comply with as a country if we want to continue that. If we didn't have that outlet, yes, obviously we'd have another 200,000 calves to rear in this country. We'd have a challenge of getting farmers that you know will get into that business of buying them, and they will add to the size of the livestock herd. So they would increase our overall emissions. Won't increase maybe the global emissions, because they go somewhere. If they don't go here, they go somewhere else. And look, we'll cross that bridge if we come to it.
And Frank, just to follow on to that, I mean, would you like to see more innovative solutions to adding value to that sector? to potentially reduce the need for exporting calves?
Absolutely. I suppose what I would love to see is that every calf that was born here in Ireland, there was a demand here locally for that calf, and that's there's been a lot of work in that area, and we've worked a lot on the dairy cow breeding side, so that we're breeding better calves, and that's things like the dairy beef index and the use of sex semen, so we get less of these male dairy calves for which there isn't a huge market. So a lot going on in terms of the supply and the type of calf. We've just in the last year introduced the genotyping program, and that in combination with what's called the CBV, or the commercial beef value of our calves, allows both the buyer and the seller to get a better sense of the value of that calf when the calf is a few weeks old. So that helps people to know what they're buying. So and then we're putting a lot of effort through the Dairy Beef 500 campaign into supporting farmers to rear those calves profitably. And the evidence from farmers participation in the program is that it can actually be a very profitable enterprise if you do it right. So I suppose that's the approach we're taking, is to try to have a local demand. And okay, if there's an exporter wants to buy the calf and outbids the local farmer, well, so be it. That's the market. But we'd love to get to a situation that, yeah, for every calf that was being produced, somebody put their eye on him and said, I'd like that calf.
Just another question here in relation to biomethane. And it's probably more of a policy question, but do you see the Irish government paying for methane reducing products? Sorry, this is not a biomethane question. It's more, sorry, in relation to feed additives. Do you see the Irish government paying for methane reducing products? They have, as they have done in Belgium. Do you see the government introducing a carbon tax like they have done in Denmark? So this, yeah, very much on the feed additive side.
So look, I don't know that they are policy questions, but I suppose what is clear is that there are opportunities to reduce methane emissions through feed additives. As yet, there isn't a good business model to persuade farmers to use those. In other words, there's no financial gain from feeding them. You might reduce emissions, but you don't get any kick in performance. And you contrast that with protected urea. We were able to say to farmers, you'll get the same response in terms of grass production, and it's actually slightly cheaper in terms of the cost per unit of nitrogen. So there's both an environmental dividend and a financial dividend. With the feed additives, we have the environmental dividend, but we actually have a financial cost. So how is that cost going to be bridged for farmers? That's something that is not clear, not just in Ireland, but across all countries really. And yes, I know they're discussing a tax in Denmark and so on, but I think we need to see more details really how that might work and incentivize the use of methane reducing technologies.
And to get to the biomethane question that was here as well, what actions are Teagasc taking to support the biomethane strategy that has been recently launched by the government?
Yeah. So look, we have a good bit of research going on in terms of the logistics, the economics, the feasibility of that, and how you might put together a viable biomethane plant and supply chain. And I suppose there's still a bit of uncertainty as to what the supports are going to be. But I think we have a lot of information now that once people know where they stand, they'll be able to see, does this work for me or not. We're also working on the production end of it, the production of the feedstocks, and you have to do those in a way that meets certain sustainability criteria. So we've been working on that, and we have a pilot plant in Grange, a pilot anaerobic digestion plant, where we can, I suppose, test the yields of biomethane and so on from different types of feedstocks and different proportions of slurries and silages or whatever your feedstock might be, and that plant is just coming on stream now. So we've got quite a bit of, I suppose, knowledge built up now to support the industry as it moves into the next phase of its development.
We're getting closer to the end of our hour, Frank. We have a question. It's more of a global question in relation to land use. So what is the best framework for balancing different land use options? How should we decide effectively about the right balance between food, energy, and infrastructure? So quite a big question there in relation to that need for, is there some need for a structure or a plan, a land use plan for Ireland?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a very hard one to answer because you're very often comparing an apple to an orange, and which is most important to you. We need more renewable energy, but also we need food. So, and one can come at times can come at the cost of the other. So I guess the system we have, the market, which is modulated by policy, is what will decide that. Is it more profitable for a farmer to get into producing feedstocks for anaerobic digestion versus using that land for producing feed for livestock or for crop production? And so the drivers of a decision that a farmer might make around that, well, policy is a huge one. That's why I say it's the market modulated or influenced by policy. And there is no model, I suppose, really that can, you can plug figures in and say, well, this is the optimum balance of, we should put X% of our land into energy and Y% into food. These are choices really that society and the political system has to make as to where they see the balance of priorities for the country. I suppose it's never one or the other. I suppose that's the only thing I'd say. We do need more renewable energy. There is a role for agriculture in supplying that, whether it's rooftop solar or field solar or crops for biomass burning or for anaerobic digestion. So certainly there will be some role for agriculture in that. But agriculture is primarily about food production, and going back to your earlier question, Mark, about the growing global population. You know what I mean? That has to be, I think, the priority really for the world, to ensure that we have a stable, reliable, safe, and nutritious supply of food for our population. And obviously, all the challenges of getting that to the people that need it in terms of our food system are there. But that is to me the ultimate challenge for our agriculture sector is to meet that need.
A very straightforward, simple question. Might be so simple to answer. It asks around the MAC curve that Teagasc has produced. It says, Frank, is the roadmap diagram, or MAC, that Teagasc has developed to achieve climate action targets, is it realistic? How confident are you that with all of the measures, and given the fact that we know that adoption rates aren't necessarily where they need to be, how confident are you that these figures are going to, or these targets are going to be reached?
Yeah, so look, it's a good question. I suppose the two uncertainties in the MAC, one is the technologies that are still under refinement or development, and that's things like the feed additives. It's things maybe like the long-term breeding strategy for reducing methane. There's still work to be done on those. I'm confident that uncertainty, that we will find the technologies that can be used. The other uncertainty is the adoption rates. And yes, it does require very high adoption rates of the various measures in order to reach the end point, the 25% reduction. So I'm going to say that I'm very exercised by making sure that we do everything we can to support farmers to do that. I don't want to say I'm confident or pessimistic. I'm always an optimist. I think they're stretching targets, but I think there is, by and large, there's a willingness on the part of farmers to do the right thing, and if it makes kind of sense for them, if it doesn't cost them money, I think they will. The speed we can see change happening, that certainly is going to be a challenge. But look, I think we have to keep our foot to the floor and move as fast as we can and give as much support to farmers as we can. And it's not just, I suppose, the agriculture sector that's seen challenges in terms of the speed of adoption. You know, we saw just recently our sales of electric cars are back this year instead of being increasing. You know, we're maybe not moving as fast with some of the renewable energy generation capacity as we would like to be. So it's, you know, and the same with the building side of things. We have to move fast. That's what the science is telling us. But you know, moving whole systems, whole economies, it is challenging. So we will certainly keep pressing on, and I know the sector is strongly committed. So I think we still have to keep that as the goal, that we are aiming for this these rates of adoption by 2030.
And I think it's fair to say, I mean, there's been huge recognition for the across Europe that innovative approach of that whole industry approach being taken across Ireland through the Signpost program. So it's great to see that agri-food sector wide approach being taken. We're over time, believe it or not.
Oh,
Unfortunately, we didn't get through all of the questions that came through from our audience, and apologies for not being able to do that. So maybe that's our mandate to have you back again sometime soon, Frank,
okay,
to
love to,
discuss
Mark. Yes,
some of these really important issues. I want to thank you for taking the time out of. I know you have a really busy schedule, but I think today it was a really useful to talk about those broader issues affecting agriculture in Ireland. To flag next week, we're being joined by Dr. Robert Leonard and Stephanie Ronan from the Department of Agriculture. We're going to be discussing the dairy calf to beef welfare and TAM supports available to farmers. So do join us for that on the 12th, Friday the 12th. In the meantime, we hope you have a lovely weekend, and let's pray that these temperatures will increase a little bit for us in the next few weeks. Until then, thanks again, Frank, and we'll see you all
thank you.
next week.